The breaking point. The emergency session of the Galactic Assembly convened under circumstances that no one had anticipated. Representatives from 72 species filled the massive chamber, their attention focused on the human delegation that stood at the central platform. The air itself seemed heavy with tension, as holographic displays flickered to life above the assembly floor. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood alone at the podium, his silver hair catching the light from above. At 68 years old, he had served humanity's diplomatic corps for 4 decades, always advocating for peaceful solutions. Today, however, something was different. The usual warmth in his eyes had been replaced by something colder, harder. The holographic display shifted, showing images that made several species recoil. Aurora Prime, a human agricultural settlement that had existed peacefully for 85 years, was now nothing more than scattered debris and scorched earth. The biodomes that had housed 15,000 colonists were shattered. The fields that had fed 3 neighboring systems were burning. 72 hours ago, Webb began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands, the Keltharian Empire launched an unprovoked assault on Aurora Prime. 15,000 human civilians died in the attack. Men, women, and children who had never raised a weapon against anyone. He paused, letting the images continue their silent testimony. A child's toy floating in the debris field, a medical facility torn in half, gardens that would never bloom again. This marks the 4th attack on human civilian targets in 3 months, Webb continued. We have responded to each incident with diplomatic channels. We have offered peace talks, mediation through neutral parties, and even economic compensation for any grievances the Keltharian Empire might hold against us. Every offer has been rejected. Every attempt at dialogue has been met with silence or mockery. From the Keltharian section of the assembly, a massive figure rose. War Chief Zarthok stood nearly 3 meters tall, his forearms crossed over his armored chest. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world, making them naturally powerful and aggressive. The Keltharian Empire had conquered 18 systems over the past century, and they showed no signs of stopping. The human speaks of peace as if it were a virtue. Zarthok's voice boomed through the chamber, his translator rendering his harsh language into galactic standard. But in this galaxy, peace is merely the interval between conquests. Your species has existed in our territory for decades, growing fat on worlds that should belong to the strong. You call yourselves peaceful, but I see only weakness. Several species made sounds of agreement. The Keltharians had allies among the more aggressive civilizations, and humanity's reputation for avoiding conflict had made them appear vulnerable. Webb closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, every camera in the chamber focused on his face. What they saw there made some of the more perceptive delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. We are issuing a final warning to the Keltharian Empire, Webb said quietly. The chamber, which had been filled with murmurs, fell completely silent. End all military actions against human territories immediately. Cease all hostile operations. Agree to binding arbitration for your actions, or our courtesy protocol will be terminated. The silence lasted for exactly 3 seconds before the chamber erupted in noise. Laughter came from the Keltharian section, confusion from others. A few species, the older civilizations who had studied human history more carefully, sat very still. Zarthok's laughter boomed over the chaos. Courtesy protocol? You threaten us with the removal of your politeness? What will you do, human? Stop saying please when we take your worlds. Perhaps you will frown at us very sternly? Webb didn't respond to the mockery. Instead, he transmitted a data package to every delegate's communication system. I am providing you with complete historical records of Earth's development. I strongly encourage every species present to review this material. We have been members of this assembly for 180 years. In that time, we have never used military force. We have mediated conflicts, provided humanitarian aid, and shared our technology freely. We did this because we chose to be better than our history. We chose courtesy over violence. He looked directly at Zarthok. But courtesy is a choice. It is not weakness. It is not surrender. It is a conscious decision to restrain power in favor of peace. You have mistaken our choice for inability. That is your first mistake. Continuing your attacks will be your last. Without waiting for a response, Webb and the entire human delegation walked out of the chamber. The silence they left behind was deafening. In the hours that followed, the historical data package became the most accessed document in galactic assembly history. Species after species downloaded humanity's records and began to read. What they found disturbed many of them profoundly. On the world of Thesara, home to one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, High Scholar Varana sat in her study reviewing the human files. Her crystalline form pulsed with increasingly dark colors as she read World War I, World War II, the nuclear age, the AI rebellions, the resource wars, the genetic plague of 2087. Humanity's history was drenched in blood. They had developed weapons capable of ending all life on their planet a dozen times over. They had created artificial intelligences that had turned against them. They had engineered diseases as weapons. They had fought wars that killed hundreds of millions, and yet somehow they had survived it all. More than survived, they had learned. They had put aside their weapons when they reached the stars. They had chosen peace not because they were incapable of war, but because they had become too good at it. Varana sent an urgent message to her government. Evacuate all Thessaran colonies within 5 systems of Keltharian space immediately. The humans are not pacifists. They are reformed warriors. There is a profound and terrifying difference. On the Keltharian homeworld of Carthax, military commanders gathered in the war room beneath the capital city. The massive chamber was filled with tactical displays, showing the Empire's military assets, thousands of warships, orbital weapons platforms, ground forces numbering in the millions. Zarthok stood at the center of it all, his forearms gesturing at the displays. The humans have less than 200 military vessels in their entire fleet. Most of those are outdated cargo haulers converted for patrol duty. They have no significant weapon production facilities. They have no warrior culture. They are farmers and merchants playing at being soldiers. One of his subordinates, a younger officer named Carvol, spoke hesitantly. War Chief, I have been reviewing the historical data they provided. Their pre-spaceflight era shows extensive military capability. They nearly destroyed themselves multiple times. Perhaps we should consider their warning seriously. Zarthok's contempt was visible. They nearly destroyed themselves because they were foolish children playing with weapons they did not understand. They gave up violence because they learned they could not handle it. This makes them prey, not predators. Prepare the assault fleet. We will take their core world of Meridian next. 100,000 humans live there. We will show them what real power looks like. Carvol wanted to argue further, but the look in Zarthok's eyes silenced him. The war chief had never lost a battle. He had conquered systems single-handedly. He would not listen to warnings about a species known throughout the galaxy for their peaceful nature. 8 light-years away from Earth, in a region of space marked on all charts as an asteroid field, something was changing. The asteroids, which had floated silently for nearly 2 centuries, began to move. Not randomly, but with purpose and coordination. They weren't asteroids at all. Admiral Kenji Tanaka stood in the command center of Installation Nightfall, watching as the concealment fields powered down. He was 74 years old, a veteran of humanity's last military action before joining the galactic community. That action had been the suppression of a rogue colony that had attempted to restart the genetic warfare programs. It had cost 8,000 lives and had convinced humanity to implement the courtesy protocol. The installation had been built in secret over a period of 30 years, before humanity had even made first contact with alien species. It was meant to be insurance, a final safeguard that every human hoped would never be activated. Around him, 200 warships came to life. These were not the merchant vessels that humanity used for trade. These were purpose-built instruments of war, incorporating every lesson humanity had learned from centuries of conflict. Enhanced with technology, humanity had developed during their time in the galactic community. Tanaka's communication officer looked up from her console. Admiral, we're receiving the activation codes from Earth Command. Protocol Nightfall is authorized. We are weapons-free. Tanaka nodded slowly. He had voted in favor of the courtesy protocol when he was a young officer. He had believed humanity could transcend its violent nature. He still believed it. But belief and reality were sometimes different things. Send a message to all vessels, he said quietly. All crews are to review the engagement protocols. We are not going to war to conquer. We are not going to war to destroy. We are going to war to teach. Surgical strikes only. 0 civilian casualties. We show them exactly what we are capable of. and we show them that we can be precise even in our fury." He looked at the tactical display showing Keltharian space. "They think courtesy means weakness. We're going to show them that courtesy is a gift, and we're taking it back." On Meridian, Administrator Chen stood on the observation deck of the colony's central hub, looking up at the stars. She was 42 years old, born on this colony, and had never known Earth except through stories. Meridian was home to 100,000 humans, mostly families who had come here to build a new life. The warning had come 3 hours ago. Keltharian fleet inbound. Estimated time of arrival, 6 hours. Estimated force, 300 warships. Chen had activated all emergency protocols. Civilians were in the shelters. The colony's minimal defense grid was powered up, though everyone knew it was inadequate against a force that size. Evacuation wasn't possible. There wasn't enough time or transport capacity. She had sent a final message to Earth Command, simply stating that Meridian would not surrender. If this was where humanity made its stand, they would stand proudly. What she didn't know, what none of the colonists knew, was that Admiral Tanaka's fleet had already jumped into the system. They were positioned between Meridian and the incoming Keltharian force, completely invisible to conventional sensors. In the cold void of space, 200 human warships waited in perfect silence. Each crew member knew what was at stake. Each captain had reviewed the rules of engagement a dozen times. They were about to show the galaxy something that had been hidden for nearly 2 centuries. They were about to show the galaxy why humanity had chosen to be courteous. The Keltharian fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Meridian system, 300 warships, each one a proven weapon of conquest. Zarthok stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conqueror's Pride, watching the tactical displays. "Target the orbital stations first," he commanded, "then the surface settlements. I want total destruction. Let this be a message to any species that thinks they can deny the Keltharian Empire." His weapons officer began charging the main guns. The fleet spread into attack formation, each ship moving to its designated position. It was a maneuver they had performed 100 times before against a dozen different species. Then the universe changed. Space itself seemed to ripple, and suddenly there were human ships where there had been nothing. Not 20 or 30, but 200. They appeared simultaneously, forming a perfect defensive wall between the Keltharian fleet and Meridian. On the bridge of the Conqueror's Pride, every alarm began screaming at once. Admiral Tanaka's voice filled every communication channel, human and Keltharian alike. "This is Admiral Kenji Tanaka of the Human Defense Fleet. Keltharian vessels, you have entered this system with hostile intent against a civilian population. You have been warned to cease your aggression. You chose to ignore that warning. Our courtesy protocol is now terminated." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was colder than the vacuum of space. "You are about to learn what we have been protecting you from. Power down your weapons and engines immediately. This is your only warning. Any ship that fires will be eliminated. You have 30 seconds to comply." Zarthok stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 200 ships had appeared from nowhere. Impossible. Humans didn't have that kind of fleet. They didn't have that kind of technology. "All weapons fire at will," he roared. "Destroy them!" The Keltharian fleet opened fire with everything they had. Thousands of weapons unleashed their fury at the human ships. The attack never reached its targets. When courtesy Ds, the weapons fire from 300 Keltharian warships should have been overwhelming. Plasma cannons, kinetic railguns, missile swarms, and energy beams converged on the human defensive line with enough destructive power to crack a moon in half. The brilliant light of the assault illuminated the darkness of space like a newborn star. Then the light simply stopped. Invisible barriers surrounded each human vessel, fields of controlled energy that absorbed every attack without even flickering. The Keltharian weapons struck these shields and dissipated harmlessly, their fury reduced to nothing more than light and heat that dispersed into the void. On the bridge of the Conqueror's Pride, Zarthok watched in stunned silence as his fleet's opening salvo accomplished absolutely nothing. Not a single human ship showed damage. Not one defensive screen wavered. "Impossible," he whispered. "Nothing can withstand that much firepower." His tactical officer's voice cracked with fear. "War Chief, their defensive systems are operating at less than 40% capacity. They're not even trying. This was just a test to see what we could do." Before Zarthok could respond, the human ships moved. They didn't accelerate slowly like normal vessels. They simply appeared in new positions as if they had teleported. The movement was so fluid, so impossibly fast, that the Keltarian targeting systems couldn't track them. Admiral Tanaka's voice came through again, calm and measured. You had your warning. You chose violence. Now you face the consequences. The first Keltharian battleship ceased to exist in the time it takes a heart to beat. There was no explosion, no dramatic destruction. Reality itself seemed to fold around the vessel, and then there was only empty space where a warship had been. The crew of 800 simply vanished, their atoms scattered across dimensions that human scientists had learned to manipulate decades ago. 3 more ships followed in rapid succession. Then 6 more. Then a dozen. The human vessels moved through space like dancers, each movement precise and deliberate. They fought with a terrible beauty, an artistry born from centuries of perfecting the craft of war. Zarthok finally found his voice. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Return fire, concentrate on individual targets. The Keltharian fleet tried to respond, tried to adapt, but they were fighting an enemy that operated on a completely different level. Human ships appeared and disappeared, struck and vanished, always one step ahead of the Keltharian targeting systems. It wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. From the human vessel designated Shadow of Regret, Captain Sarah Omondi watched the engagement with grim satisfaction. Her ship carried weapons that humanity had sworn never to use again. Dimensional disruptors, quantum cascade bombs, nano disassemblers. Technology that had been locked away when humanity joined the galactic community, deemed too terrible for civilized warfare. Target the flagship's weapon systems, she ordered. Disable, don't destroy. We're not here to commit genocide. We're here to teach a lesson. Her weapons officer nodded and fired. Small objects, each no larger than a child's fist, launched from the Shadow of Regret. They moved with their own intelligence, guided by AI systems that could calculate trajectories and probabilities faster than any biological mind. The objects were nanite swarms, billions of microscopic machines programmed for a single purpose. They reached the Conqueror's pride and attached themselves to the hull. Within seconds, they began eating through the armor plating, seeking out power conduits and weapon systems. The massive Keltharian flagship suddenly went dark. All weapons offline, all offensive capability neutralized. Life support remained functional. The crew would live, but they were no longer a threat. Across the battlefield, the same scene repeated itself. Human ships disabled Keltharian vessels with surgical precision. Some ships lost engines, others lost weapons. A few lost both, but none exploded. None vaporized. No Keltharian died unless they were caught in the initial strikes. And even those deaths were instantaneous and painless. On Meridian, Administrator Chen and her entire colony watched the battle through their sensor feeds. The observation deck was packed with people, all standing in silent awe. The human fleet was outnumbered 3-2, yet the Keltharians were being systematically dismantled. How? Someone whispered. How did we hide this? How long has this existed? Chen shook her head slowly. Long enough. Our grandparents built these ships. Our parents maintained them. And we hoped, prayed, that we would never need them. She looked at the faces around her, seeing the same mix of relief and horror reflected in every expression. We're safe. But the galaxy will never see us the same way again. In the Galactic Assembly Chamber, emergency session monitors displayed live feeds from the Meridian system. Representatives from 72 species watched in absolute silence as humanity revealed what they had been hiding for nearly 2 centuries. High Scholar Varana of Thesara stood before the assembly, her crystalline form pulsing with dark amber light. I warned you, she said quietly. I reviewed their history. I told you they were not pacifists. They were warriors who chose peace. There is a profound difference between cannot fight and will not fight. Ambassador Webb stood in the human section, watching the battle with an expression of deep sadness. He had spent his entire career building bridges, fostering peace, and showing the galaxy that humanity could be trusted. Now, in less than an hour, all of that careful work was being redefined. A Keltharian junior ambassador approached him, her voice shaking. Please, call them off. We surrender. We didn't know. We didn't understand. Webb looked at her with tired eyes. I tried to tell you. I begged your war chief to read our history. He chose mockery instead of wisdom. Now the lesson is being taught in a harder way. On the battlefield, 40 minutes had passed since the engagement began. Of the 300 Keltharian warships, 220 were disabled and drifting. 60 had been completely destroyed in the initial minutes when they refused to surrender. The remaining 20 ships had powered down their weapons and engines, broadcasting surrender signals on all channels. Admiral Tanaka surveyed the tactical display with satisfaction. The engagement had gone exactly according to plan. Overwhelming force, precise application, minimal casualties. The Keltharian fleet was broken, but their species would survive. That was important. Humanity wasn't here to commit genocide. They were here to establish a boundary that would never be crossed again. Send recovery teams to all disabled vessels, he ordered. Provide medical assistance to any wounded. We treat prisoners with dignity and respect. That's what separates us from conquerors. He opened a channel to the conqueror's pride. War Chief Zarthok, this is Admiral Tanaka. Your fleet is defeated. Your ships are disabled. Your warriors are at our mercy. But we are not going to harm them further. We are not you. We remember what monsters look like, and we have chosen not to become them. There was a long pause before Zarthok responded. His voice, usually so confident and booming, was barely a whisper. What are you? Tanaka considered the question carefully. We are what happens when a violent species learns wisdom. We are what happens when warriors choose peace without forgetting how to fight. We are humanity, and we have been courteous to this galaxy for 180 years. You forced us to remember what we used to be. I hope the lesson was worth the cost. He switched to a fleet-wide channel. All ships maintain defensive positions around Meridian. Secure all Keltharian prisoners and provide medical care. And someone send a message to the Keltharian homeworld. Tell them we're coming. Tell them we're going to dismantle their military infrastructure. Tell them they have one chance to do this peacefully. The message reached Carthax 6 hours later. The Keltharian Grand Council convened an emergency session, their war room now feeling more like a tomb. Reports from Meridian had reached them. Their fleet was destroyed, their war chief was captured, and human warships were now moving toward their territory. Carvol, the young officer who had tried to warn Zarthok, now stood before the council. Honored leaders, I have analyzed the battle. The humans were restraining themselves. They could have destroyed every ship in minutes. They chose to disable most of our fleet instead. They're not here to exterminate us. They're here to break our ability to threaten others. The eldest council member, a female named Targesh, looked at him with ancient eyes. What do you recommend? Surrender, Carvol said simply. Immediately, unconditionally, we cannot win this war. We cannot even fight this war. The humans have technology we don't understand and capabilities we never imagined. But more importantly, they have restraint. They're showing us mercy even as they defeat us. If we continue to resist, they might stop showing mercy. The council debated for 3 hours. Pride warred with survival. Honor fought against wisdom. In the end, survival won. The Keltharian Empire sent a message to the approaching human fleet, agreeing to all terms. They would disarm. They would submit to galactic arbitration. They would pay reparations to the human colonies they had attacked. Admiral Tanaka received the surrender and allowed himself a small smile. Send confirmation. We accept their surrender. Begin dismantling operations, but remember, we do this surgically. We remove their weapons, not their dignity. Over the next 3 weeks, human forces systematically dismantled Keltharian military infrastructure. Weapons platforms were disabled. Warships were stripped of offensive capabilities. Military shipyards were converted to civilian production. Throughout it all, not a single Keltharian civilian was harmed. Human medical teams even provided aid to Keltharian colonies that had been neglected by their own military government. The galaxy watched in fascination. Humanity had revealed themselves as the most powerful military force in known space. Yet they used that power with precision and restraint. They had every opportunity to conquer, to expand, to dominate. Instead, they simply removed the threat and returned to their previous territories. The Galactic Assembly convened to address the situation. Ambassador Webb stood once again at the central podium, looking tired but resolute. The courtesy protocol has been reinstated, he announced. Humanity has no desire for conquest. We have no interest in domination. We simply will not allow our people to be slaughtered without consequence. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from species both friendly and hostile. For 180 years we have been members of this community. We have shared our technology. We have mediated your conflicts. We have provided aid without asking for payment. We did these things because we chose peace. That choice remains unchanged. But understand this clearly. Peace is not the same as helplessness. Courtesy is not the same as weakness. High Scholar Varana rose to speak. The Thessaran Confederacy moves to formally recognize humanity's right to maintain defensive forces. We further move to establish humanity as a protectorate power, authorized to defend species unable to defend themselves against aggression. The vote was nearly unanimous. Only the species closely allied with the Keltharian Empire abstained. Humanity was now officially recognized not just as peaceful, but as powerful. The two qualities, once thought contradictory, were now understood to coexist. On Earth, in a garden outside the Global Council building, Marcus Webb sat with Admiral Kenji Tanaka. Both men were elderly, both tired, both changed by recent events. Did we do the right thing? Webb asked quietly. Tanaka was silent for a long moment. We did the necessary thing. We showed them that peace is a choice, not a weakness. We showed them that courtesy is something we give, not something taken from us. We remained who we are, even as we remembered what we were. Webb nodded slowly. The next generation won't have to wonder if humanity can defend itself. They'll know we can. The question is whether we can remain peaceful knowing we have that power. That, Tanaka said with a slight smile, is a question every generation has to answer for themselves. Our ancestors answered it by building those ships and then hiding them away. We answered it by using them only when we had no choice. Our children will have to make their own answer. Above them, stars glittered in the evening sky. Human merchant ships moved between those stars, carrying trade and culture and knowledge. Human diplomats worked in those distant systems, building relationships and solving problems. Human teachers and doctors and engineers helped other species thrive. Humanity remained peaceful. But now the galaxy knew that peace was humanity's choice to make, and humanity alone would decide when and if that courtesy would be extended. The Keltharian Empire recovered slowly over the following decades. Their military was restructured under galactic oversight. Their government reformed. And in their schools they taught their children about the day they learned the difference between weakness and restraint, between inability and unwillingness. They taught them about the day humanity stopped being courteous and reminded the galaxy what they had chosen not to be.